Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to an exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. This is show 1001, and so we're working on the next 1,000 now. I'd like to welcome back to the show a couple of guests that have been on before. We have Paula Noel McVie, PhD?
McPhee.
McPhee.
Yes.
McPhee. And you're going to talk about your cannabis business, and making suppositories made of cannabis.
Yes, yep.
And then Doug McVeigh, longtime activist all over the nation and the world. Doug and I both moved here to Oregon in 1984 to work on the Oregon Marijuana Initiative, and we've both been involved in one way or another ever since then. So good to see Doug. And over in the wings, Mr. John Cornett is ready to play some music as well. Hey, John. We're back to our regular format. We have a newscast for the first time since, I think, the 2nd of August. But first, we'll bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves, and we'll be right back after that. Here they are.
I feel the force.
Our first story tonight is about the controversy over vape cartridges, which has been covering the news and driving the politicians crazy. You know, they are too worried about regulating production and not enough about public safety. They want to try to track every plant grown and how it dries and keep track of all that and make all the growers spend all this money to do that. But updated data provided today by the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, reports over 800 cases of acute respiratory distress linked to the use of portable vapor cartridges used to consume certain e-liquids. According to the latest totals from the CDC, quote, among patients with data on substances used in e-cigarettes or vaping products, tetrahydrocannabinol containing product use was reported by 76.9% of this 800 people, or about 36% reported exclusive THC product use, 56.8% reported nicotine-containing product use, 16% of those reported exclusive nicotine product use. To date, 13 deaths have been reported, and that the majority of the incidences appeared to be linked to the purchase of counterfeit products obtained from unregulated, informal vendors. Of the products tested thus far by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, about half have been identified the presence of vitamin E acetate, the New York Times has reported. The inhalation of vitamin E oil had previously been linked with lipoid pneumonia, and that's what these people have been dying from. Additives like vitamin E were recently introduced to unregulated oil products in an effort to make their consistency flow in these little cartridges and to mask the dilution of it. A report issued earlier this month by the New York state health officials identified, quote, very high levels of vitamin E acetate in nearly all cannabis-containing vapor cartridges samples that were analyzed, end quote. Most recently, an investigation by NBC News analyzed 18 different THC vapor cartridge products. Their analysis concluded, quote, of the 3 purchased from legal dispensaries in California, the Cannabis testing company found no heavy metals, pesticides, or residual solvents like vitamin E. But 13 out of the 15 other samples from the black market were found to contain vitamin E, end quote. In addition, Cannabis also tested 10 of the unregulated cartridges for pesticides, and all 10 tested positive for the presence of pesticides. Out of Washington, D.C., members of the U.S. House of Representatives voted on Wednesday in favor of legislation H.R. 1595, the Safe Banking Act, explicitly amending federal law so that financial institutions may work directly with state-licensed marijuana retailers and other related businesses. House members voted 321 to 103 in favor of the legislation, with 229 Democrats and 91 Republicans casting yes votes. This vote is a significant first step, but it must not be the last. Much more action will be still needs to be taken by the lawmakers. In the Senate, we demand that lawmakers in the Senate Banking Committee hold true to their commitment to move expeditiously in support of similar federal reforms. And in the House, we anticipate additional efforts to move forward and pass comprehensive reform legislation like the MORE Act, which is sponsored by the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, in order to ultimately comport federal law with the new political and cultural realities surrounding marijuana. There are various pieces of legislation pending in Congress that would remove marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act, including a bill that was recently introduced by the House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler entitled the MORE Act, or the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. Federal law currently defines all marijuana-related business endeavors as criminal enterprises, including those commercial activities that are licensed and legally regulated under various state laws. Therefore, cannabis businesses can only legally obtain a bank account from a small number of small banks that charge $500 to apply and a $500 per month cannabis bank account fee. Our next story is also out of Washington, D.C. The American Bar Association, or the ABA, has passed a resolution in support of ending federal marijuana prohibition and removing the substance from the Controlled Substances Act. In language that does not mince words, the proposal reads, quote, "Further resolve, the American Bar Association urges Congress to enact legislation to remove marijuana from Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act." And out of Los Angeles, California, nearly 2/3 of Americans believe that marijuana ought to be legalized nationwide, according to polling data compiled by Investors Business Daily and Technometric Market Intelligence. Overall, 63% of respondents backed legalization, a percentage that is consistent with other recent polls. 75% of self-identified Democrats endorsed legalization, as did a majority, 66%, of independent voters. A majority of Republicans did not support legalization. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans said that they or someone in their home had consumed cannabis for medical or recreational purposes over the past 6 months. Self-reported use was highest among those aged 25 to 44. Next story is from Boston. Members of the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission decided this week in favor of regulations to establish licensing for retail cannabis deliveries and for limited on-site consumption facilities. Members voted 4-1 in favor of the provisions. Regulators in May had previously advanced the idea of permitting social use spaces. A separate provision approved unanimously by the Commission eliminates the annual fee associated with patients' medical cannabis registration cards. That would be something I'd like to see copied in all the other states, especially Oregon. Regulators anticipate accepting applications for home delivery licenses within a couple of months. The applicants will first need to gain approval from their local communities prior to seeking the Massachusetts issued permits. And our next story is also out of Massachusetts, out of Boston. The administration of a cannabis-derived flavonoid enhances radiotherapy treatment in preclinical models of pancreatic cancer, according to findings published in the journal Frontiers of Oncology. A team of researchers affiliated with the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute at Harvard University and the University of Massachusetts assessed the anti-cancer activity of a non-psychoactive cannabinoid derivative, FBL-03G, in preclinical models of metastatic pancreatic cancer. The researchers reported that the inclusion of FBL-03G during radiotherapy induced apoptosis, or cell death, and inhibited cancer cell concentrations in culture. In animal models, the compound slowed tumor growth and was associated with a significant increase in mouse survival. They concluded, quote, "The FBL-03G results reveal a new potential non-cannabinoid cannabis derivative with major potential for consideration in further investigations in the treatment of pancreatic cancer where new therapy options are urgently needed," end quote. Pancreatic cancer is one of the hardest to treat forms of the disease, killing over 90% of the sufferers within 5 years. Preclinical studies identifying anti-cancer activity of cannabinoids date back to the mid-1970s. Far fewer studies exist assessing the therapeutic efficacy of cannabis-specified flavonoids, but recently some scientists have expressed interest in their anti-inflammatory potential. This study, flavonoid derivative of cannabis, demonstrates therapeutic potential in preclinical models of metastatic pancreatic cancer. Appears in the Frontiers of Oncology this month. We have another medical article from Potsdam, Germany. The administration of oral THC or Dronabinol safely and effectively reduces pain in geriatric patients, according to clinical trial data published in the German journal Schmerz. A team of German researchers assessed the use of Dronabinol in elderly, over 80 years of age, subjects with chronic pain. Oral THC administration was associated with a pain reduction of 30% or greater in over half the patients. 10% of the subjects experienced a greater than 50% reduction in their pain. The authors concluded, quote, "This study is one of the few analyses of the use of Dronabinol in geriatric patients. We show that cannabis-based drugs, in this case Dronabinol, or synthetic THC, are effective, low-risk treatment options that should be considered early in therapy," end quote. Dronabinol has been FDA approved in the United States since 1985 as an antiemetic or anti-nausea drug and as an appetite stimulant. This study, Dronabinol in geriatric pain and palliative care patients, a retrospective evaluation of statutory health insurance covered outpatient treatment, appears in the German medical journal Schmerz. Out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, a history of cannabis use is not associated with any greater risk of adverse outcomes among kidney transplant recipients, according to data published in the journal Clinical Transplantation. Investigators with the Minneapolis-based healthcare clinic chain Hennepin Healthcare assessed the impact of marijuana and tobacco consumption on over 900 kidney transplant recipients. The authors reported that a history of tobacco use was associated with an elevated risk of adverse outcomes, but that the use of cannabis alone was not. They concluded, quote, "Marijuana use should not be an absolute contraindication to kidney transplant," end quote. I personally have known more than 100 people who died because they've been taken off the kidney transplant list or the liver transplant list because of medical marijuana. The study's findings are consistent with those of prior studies concluding that a history of cannabis use is not contraindicated in patients receiving organ transplants. Nonetheless, it remains hospital policy in various jurisdictions to automatically disqualify medical cannabis patients from being eligible to receive organ transplants. That's a travesty, and hopefully it will stop. That's the end of our hemp news segment for tonight, and John Cornett's going to play a song. Hey, John.
Yes, sir. I just have to say something. Our friend Dash, he a transplant patient, and he attributes. He says the oil helped save his life.
Yeah.
It helped rectify, I guess, his.
But he didn't
metabolism.
get the transplant.
He did get it.
He did it. So he did it after. He took the oil after he got the transplant.
Of course. Anyway, this is a song. I've said it before, and it still applies. It goes like this: called "Now is the Time." Now is the time. Time is now to tell the truth, to hear the truth, to know the truth, to know the truth. of lies and fantasies isn't how it has to be. And ignorance throwing stones like so many brainless clones. Sound the alarm, re-educate. Sound the alarm, investigate. Now is the time for the truth. Whoa, whoa. Now is the time. Whoa, whoa. Corporations, governments are rarely ever innocent. Dissension is the only way. Live to see another day. Sound the alarm, investigate. Sound the alarm, re-educate, re-educate. Now is the time for the truth. Whoa, whoa. Now is the time. Whoa, whoa. Sound the alarm, re-educate. Sound the alarm, investigate. Now is the time for the truth. Whoa, whoa. Now is the time. Whoa, whoa. Now is the time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. So, I'd like to welcome you back again, Paula Noel, and you too, Doug. Good to see you. Yeah, so Doug and I have known each other a really long time. We both moved here in 1984, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I moved here in 84. You'd been here before for a little bit.
I came out at the beginning of the, I got here in June, stepped off the Greyhound, got onto the van, did some of the petitioning, but then stayed after the petitioning. The petition was rejected to work with them on the ballot measure, or on the Supreme
legal
Court
case.
seat.
There was a writ of mandamus to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court ordered that the second marijuana vote ever in the United States should happen. But then the next day, Norma Paulus, who was the Secretary of State, pulled a little trick that I think hurt her politically in the long run.
Ultimately, I mean, they should have just counted the darn signatures and done it right. But I mean,
They took it off again.
They took it off
delaying
again.
the vote by 2 years.
But the next session, a lot of reforms were made to the electoral system in Oregon because of that experience. I know Anthony Taylor was down there in Salem on a regular. I went down with him when I came back in '85 to see some of these bills go through. It was, yeah. I mean, there's still some issues, and the county clerks still have way too much power, but. It's ridiculous. I want to talk about that vape thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, please do.
A story that I'm working on with Celeb Stoner on this thing because, of course, we happen. This is one of the problems. This is I'm not going to show you the label because that would be bad. I'll just tell you the ingredients on this legal vape cartridge that I purchased a few days ago.
Purchased at a dispensary.
At a dispensary,
not one of these
right.
black market ones that apparently are almost always contaminated.
Fully legal, fully everything is fine. Ingredients: cannabis extract, non-cannabis derived terpenes, artificial and natural flavors. I don't know what's in this.
Yeah.
And that bothers me. I mean, that bothers me. I don't know what's in this. I went to the company's website, saw that they do use one of these diluents, which a lot of these folks do. They put in some kind of an oil or some kind of a product. It's a viscosity booster. Basically, they cut the cannabis oil with this
Yeah,
stuff.
this thing to make it flow, because otherwise it's thicker than molasses, and that doesn't flow in those little tiny cartridges.
There you go, and so you have to. Okay, so go to the website there, find out what they use, go to the website of the company that has that. There's the product, and it says, well, it doesn't have any of this, doesn't have any of that.
They say they have non-cannabis derived terpenes there,
yes,
right?
They don't say where it's from. And the diluent, like I say, the one I went to the website of the
Doesn't say what
manufacturer.
that
It's a local
could
company.
be vitamin E.
Won't say. Well, no, it says not. But you know what? They have a safety data sheet, a material safety data sheet, which is supposed to show what's in it and tell you all the damage, the danger, the things that could happen. And one thing that's very clear is it's a proprietary trade secret. They won't tell you what's in that stuff.
Right, right.
I don't know what it is. I do know at the back they indicate none of this has been tested with, in terms of human effects when you heat it and inhale it. Oh, no testing of that. We never did. No one else has. There's no safety information about this. You're on your own, and you just should be informed about whatever it is you're taking. Except you don't know what it is.
Right.
And that's where the real problem. Forget these bans, and it's not about the flavoring. Bloody make them list the ingredients. Make them list these ingredients. Like nicotine or CBD or cannabis or THC, all of them. Make them list these ingredients. Don't let them get away with this, oils, natural and artificial flavors. That's just wrong.
The OLCC is more interested about diversion and tracking every leaf and every ounce to make sure it doesn't get out to anyone it shouldn't go to. And I'm not in favor of it getting out, but they should be looking at this first. Public safety should be the most important thing, you would think. That's who they're supposed to work for us.
This is a place where OLCC actually screwed up. If you go onto their website, if you take their materials, August of 2018, there were changes in the labeling and packaging laws. Fine, there are guidelines, there are things up there on their website. They do not, this thing here, this cannabis, non-cannabis derived terpenes is directly from their guidelines. They don't have a thing about about labeling any of this. The rules are the law is a little vague, but the rules they put out letting people get away with this. It's the vape industry. It's not just the cannabis, folks. It's the vape industry.
People
it's
don't know
the
what they're
tobacco
doing.
industry. They don't want you to know what it is
That's
that
the
they're
problem.
selling you to put in your lungs.
As you may recall,
our lungs.
I
lungs.
was criticized, and Measure 80 in 2012 was criticized for putting people in the cannabis industry on the Oregon Cannabis Commission that Measure 80 would have founded. They said that was like putting Philip Morris in charge of the tobacco industry. Well, I think Philip Morris is in charge of the tobacco industry, but who knows better? Obviously, the people who are selling beer and liquor bottles don't know what to do. I personally had a couple of OLCC inspectors come to my medical-only little tiny garden to look at my plants this week. Can we look at your plants?
Really?
It's like, gosh, we want to make sure that you're putting those very expensive little plastic tags on and scanning and uploading them correctly and jumping through all of these hoops that have no real meaning or connection to public safety. It's really a response to federal DEA interference and law enforcement. Don't you agree?
It absolutely is. I mean, were legislators just were they drunk? Were they stoned? What were these people thinking that somehow attaching a plastic tag or attaching a microchip to a plant is going?
Well, you can
it
bet
wasn't
that
going
the
to magically
people
go
who
through the
sell
plant
those-
into the flowers. I think that's what they thought. In fact, in Colorado, just a year or so ago, there was a bill. It got withdrawn. It died. Because it was an idiotic idea, but they wanted to fund research into making some kind of maybe like a spray or some kind of a tagant
I remember
that
that.
would stay with this plant as it grew, and you could track it for. It's like, this is magical thinking. It's stupid, but I think that's what they really believed. I think they had the idea that you could somehow inject this microchip into the plant and it would magically spread throughout all the trichomes and into the flowers. And it's just
a DNA tag.
oh my God! And that's the kind of thing that they thought.
Yeah.
And it's as legalization goes, it could just get worse. I mean, just keep
God
it inside.
forbid.
Well, we're dealing with a system that is very dysfunctional in its thinking. So we cannot fix it. We're dealing with a Eurocentric, Western mind, colonized system trying to capitalize on plant medicine. That is not going to change unless the thinking behind the system changes. And we can't change people's worldviews. We can only change our own and also connect with those that understand. But trying to take on this system, it's been dysfunctional for so long.
We educate.
Yeah.
We can change it. I had many people over the years tell me you're never going to legalize marijuana. It's not going to happen in our lifetime. And it didn't happen in a lot of our friends' lifetimes. But it did finally happen. Change happens. Social change takes a lot longer. I'm sure when Doug and I were back in our 20s and we came here to work on this, we didn't think we'd be in our late 50s or pushing 60 before we succeeded when we started down this path. What did you think, Doug?
I was kind of hoping that sometime in the by the 1990s, it was we kind of missed that window pretty well. But you know, when we got in '84, it was, I think, Bob Randall, and I think that was Irv Rosenfeld also a patient at that point, or was he a year or so away?
I'm not sure. We're talking in 1985, 1986. Randall got his, I think, in '82.
He got his early. I know that
he
LD
was the
got
first.
hers in '88,
right?
Because I was at the normal office when the call came in. So that was
you worked as the office manager for the national organization
activist
for
coordinator
the
and
reform.
projects coordinator. We didn't have enough people to have we didn't have enough people to have an office manager at the time. There were only 3 of us. So it was but as the only one there, you get to answer the phone.
How long did you work there in D.C.?
Oh God, for normal it was a solid 2 years, a little over 2.5, I guess.
I remember visiting you at Steve D'Angelo's old house on Butternut, the Nut House.
The Nut House was a fun little place. It truly was.
Huge house.
Activists, it was massive. I guess that it remained a sort of a party house and a fun sort of a place for quite a long time. Only recently, people were doing raves there.
Oh, really? Well, it's a big house, so it doesn't
Burning Man,
surprise me.
dude. But I think, alas, it may have been developed by now.
We have a little video with you. We've got a few, of course, but let's go ahead and run this one. This one is just less than a year and a half old. The Marijuana March here in 2018, and we'll be right back after this video.
I am Doug McVeigh. I'm the editor of a thing called Drug War Facts at drugwarfacts.org. Please do check it out on the web. It's your premier source for information on drugs, drug policies here in the United States and around the world. I also do some radio work. You may have heard me on KBOO. I have a show called Free Culture Radio. Also have a thing called Century of Lies. It goes out once a week. And I got to tell you, it's a pleasure. It's such an honor to be at the Global Marijuana March. This has a long history. I don't know if you're all aware of this. But before there was the Global Marijuana March, a bit of a mouthful, there was the Million Marijuana March. And before the Million Marijuana March, as my friend Paul Stanford and I were discussing yesterday, there was the May Day Pot Parade. Now, May Day. The 1st of May is May Day. Many of you may be aware, but in case you're not, May Day is the International Day of Worker Solidarity. May Day is an event around the world where tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people gather and rally for individual rights. Has been for decades, since well before the marijuana movement started doing something on this day. Some people wonder, well, you got something on 420, why are you doing May Day? Yeah, whatever. 420 is a day of enforced jollity. If y'all really want to go out and have a party on Hitler's birthday, y'all have fun. I'll stay home, or I'll cover an event that's actually going on. But May Day, now that's something special. In this country, we have lost sight of that, labor unions not being what they used to be. We have sort of lost sight, and people like myself, who are proud to call ourselves socialists, may not necessarily see a lot of us out here. But there are May Day events, and for me, this is our May Day. This is our day to reach out in solidarity with others and say, we are your neighbors, we're your friends, we're your family members. We smoke weed, we like weed, we think that pot should be legal. And we ask you people to join with us in calling for that. It's not so we can have a party. I could have a party anytime. If it weren't for legalization and drug policy reform work, I'd have a lot more time for partying, all right? I'm doing this because it's important, because it's about freedom, because it's about justice, and it's because it's what's right. Social justice is where it's at. There's a thing called harm reduction, where you try to reduce the harms that people do to themselves and you manage the risks that people expose themselves to. Drinking alcohol, maybe just 1 drink an hour so that your body metabolizes. That's called harm reduction. Not taking a shot of whiskey to wash down your opiate, that's harm reduction because you could kill yourself doing that. Smoking marijuana to relieve your minor pains rather than taking an opioid, that's harm reduction. Okay? Simple concept. When we give out clean syringes to people who insist on injecting drugs, people who inject drugs are people too. They're our friends, they're our family members, they're our sisters and our brothers, they're our parents, they're our spouses, they're our partners, they're our friends. They're people. So we can either leave them to get sick and to die, or we can do something about it, right? Now, Portland, there are a handful of people who've been working for a little while, and it's getting a little bigger, trying to put something together called a supervised injection facility. I know, little off topic, this is a weed thing, but you know, we got here because of drug policy reform. And we got here because people were willing to break the law to do what they think is right. Now, we have a syringe exchange that's run by the county in this area, Multnomah County, a wonderful thing, but we need more because of the overdose crisis and because really resources are just being outstripped. So a lot of folks are working to get this area to consider a supervised consumption facility, a safe consumption space, a safe injection facility. The city of New York is running close. King County, Seattle is trying. They're trying to get this done in San Francisco. They hope to have it, in fact, by sometime this summer down in San Francisco. Portland, it's our turn. We've been a leader in all this stuff. We've been a leader in marijuana legalization, in medical marijuana, and in harm reduction for a very long time. It's because people like you come out to events like this and let elected leaders and officials and just these, I'll be nice, people in places like Studio on the Square, we let them know that we really are serious. That we want this stuff to change, and we're not going to go away until it's happened. And frankly, we're still going to be here because it's still not going to be perfect, and there's still a lot of work to be done. Sure, we have medical, but God help you if you live in an apartment or federally subsidized housing. Sure, we have legalization. Of course, do be careful if you try and consume out here, because it's illegal to consume in public, and there are very likely people who would have you arrested. So, you know, are we ready? Okay. I'm going to get through and wrap this up in a second. So here's the thing. Marijuana legalization is a great thing. Drug decriminalization is absolutely vital. Harm reduction is important. All this stuff is why I do what I do. I volunteer several hours a week doing radio production. I manage a few hours of working for a few different groups. Patients at a Time. Oh, yeah. Before I leave, I need to remind you, Patients at a Time, terrific resource, still working on medical cannabis, still working to educate healthcare professionals and the public. Have a conference coming up May 10th through 12th. It's going to be in Jersey City, but hey, some flights are cheap if you got a chance, and we'll have some video after the event. You can check it out. Again, my name is Doug McVeigh. drugwarfacts.org. You can find a lot more information and all the stuff I've been talking about. I want to thank you all for being here. You are beautiful. Happy May Day.
All right. Good job. It is weird watching yourself, I know.
Just a little. Ooh, painful. Painful. Painful.
No, you did great.
Sounded great.
The hair.
So
Thank you for that, especially the harm reduction thing. Safe House in Philadelphia, the United States Attorney, the Justice Department is trying to stop the city of Philadelphia. They're in federal court trying to get a federal judge to say that a supervised consumption facility would be a violation of federal law, which would in effect shut down efforts all around the country, or at least, well, shut it down. It would force people to try and get arrested for breaking the law for saving people's lives, which would kind of be a drag. But so, thank you.
Hey,
for
well,
that
thank you.
one.
Thanks for getting out there and talking about it, Doug, as always. So, Paul and Noel McPhee. So, you have a company called Backdoor Medicine, making cannabis suppositories. Doug likes that. And so you're making those. We have some photos that we're going to put up here from those in just a moment. But you've run into some problems. I know you're making. There's talk about it being psychoactive when taking cannabis as a suppository. There's some suppositories there. Those are not psychoactive. They don't get you high.
They
right?
do not.
Right, but that doesn't stop ignorant people from telling you they do.
That is correct.
Even though it's a pretty big dose, right?
It's
you were
a pretty
saying
big dose.
200 milligrams?
Yes,
which,
well,
if you took it orally,
Oh,
through
you'd
the
probably
mouth,
end
you
up
would
in the
you'd
ER.
really get high.
Oh, yeah.
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 There's another. What is that? We've got.
That is some, I juiced some raw cannabis leaf
I see.
and
I see.
coupled that with suppositories
I see.
for a
Okay.
protocol.
Okay.
And then these are two different doses. One's a quarter of a cup, one's a half a cup. So the left side will make 15, the right side will make about 25. So it'll
Okay.
shift the dosage a little bit.
So what is the white material that's in that?
That's raw organic cacao butter.
Oh, okay, okay, just what you get in
Yep.
chocolate.
Yep.
All right. And then here, this looks like RSO.
Yes.
And so you put RSO into the cacao butter.
Yes, depending
Yeah.
on what strength I want to make it.
Right.
I usually put in a gram if I want to make 20 to 50 milligrams, but recently I've been experimenting with anywhere between 95 and 200.
So this is putting the RSO into the melted cacao butter.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. And it turns green.
it does.
Amazing.
It's gorgeous.
And then you have these little.
Adding it to the molds.
The
And these are
molds.
aluminum molds. I prefer aluminum because they make a more solid suppository for travel or for
So there it is. It's in there
insertion.
cooling down or something. And then our next, there they are, popped out of the mold.
Wow.
Okay, so what are most of your suppository patients using cannabis for? I guess if you want cannabis to be
Right.
in the area where if you've got prostate or intestinal problems, what are some of the indications for the use of suppository-based cannabis medicines?
Sure. Well, I've worked with about over 300 people, and I attend people's symptoms. So I don't necessarily look at what their disease is. I'm more concerned with what their symptoms are, and then if they work with test results, what is the progression of the test results? Are they getting better? Are they seeing what they want?
So you have a doctorate in, what's your doctorate in?
I have a PhD in recovery of indigenous mind, which is
Okay.
a specialization in decolonizing methodologies.
So it's a sociological.
Philosophical, but it also comes from the background of indigenous science.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
based in plant medicine
Uh-huh.
and indigenous thinking.
And so what brought you to work in cannabis medicine?
Well, I had a brother who had rectal cancer, and I'd heard that cannabis could be beneficial for cancer, but he ended up passing away, and I ended up...
Did you ever be able to give suppositories?
I
to your
was
brother?
not able to. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was too far along, and he decided it was just time to let go. So with that,
sorry.
yeah, thank you. I was pregnant while he was dying of cancer, and I developed some rectal fissures from childbirth, which, if anybody has had that, it's excruciating. I tried everything from Western to naturopathic to anything alternative. I was desperate, and I couldn't find relief. So one night, very intuitively, I got on the internet and I started looking up different things I could use, and I came across an article with Tommy Chong using suppositories for prostate cancer. So that planted a seed in my head. What if I made suppositories, and what if I
Tommy
used it?
Chong's good at that. He's
Oh
planted a
yeah,
lot of
he's,
seeds
he's a
over-
seed planter.
Yeah.
So I
Dave's not here.
no.
Oh, never mind.
So I put together a suppository. I purchased a mold. I got some cacao butter together. My mind was thinking, what would I put in my back door that was kind of food grade, something that would be recognizable to my body. I knew that
Cocoa.
well, coconut oil can cause a detox response, and a lot of people use coconut oil in cannabis medical products, which I would never use because that one
Okay.
person is going to have a reaction like diarrhea or very extreme cramps from that reaction to the detox.
Okay.
So I'm very adamant about sticking with cacao butter. There's so much conversation around all these alternatives, and I've always stuck with the same thing.
Tell me the difference between cacao butter, which is from the cacao plant, which is
It's
what
like
they make.
a seed, yeah.
So yeah,
Like chocolate. I mean, it's the
big.
same.
Yeah, it's the same thing, and the other that causes the detox response.
Well, coconut oil, you've heard of oil
coconut oil.
Yeah, coconut oil. You've heard of oil pulling. It's wonderful when you're detoxifying, but if you have a compromised immune system or you have some IBS or gut problems and you're adding in detoxification into that, you're going to be very uncomfortable. So I've just always stuck with raw organic cacao. There's, of course, a lot of controversy around bioavailability, if it works, if it uptakes. And when I have doctors or researchers push this toward me, I ask them, have you tried it? Have you tried it? And 9 times out of 10, they haven't tried it, and they don't know what they're talking about because they haven't asked the patients how they feel. Are you finding relief? They're not connecting with those who are using the medicine. So there's a lot of assumptions about it. There's a lot of assumptions about it can get you high. So I did a test on myself because I have significant medical diagnoses, and I started off with 95 milligrams. I typically use 50 milligrams. At 95 milligrams, I didn't notice much of a difference in terms of my symptom relief, but I had the best night of sleep ever and continued to do that for 3 or 4 days and was able to manage my fatigue and get myself back in order on 95. So then I thought, what would happen if I go up to 200? Because 200 is the dosage that they're studying in Israel at University of Bethlehem on working with cancer patients. How much medicine can we get in to find that sort of that break with cancer? And so they're finding that 200 milligrams is this sort of sweet spot. Taken over a period of time, it can deactivate cancer. So I thought, well, let's try 200 milligrams and see what happens. I'm a little experimental. So I put in 200 milligrams, same thing. Didn't notice a head high, fell fast asleep, and I haven't had to take as many dosages of the suppositories because I've been getting larger amounts in.
So if someone wanted to contact you and find out more about this, what would they do?
Well, my website is backdoormedicine.org. And
That's easy to remember.
Yes, and I have backdoormedicine@yahoo.com. I do not have a product on the shelf. What I do is I show patients and caregivers and family members, or I go into the community and educate on how to make them.
Right.
We're looking at possibly putting backdoor medicine on the shelf for accessibility for things like menstrual cramps, or one sort of avenue I'm pushing now for is survivors of sexual trauma using suppositories to heal. So there's a huge market for it, but it has to be accessible and it has to be affordable.
Well,
And we have to have our ingredients listed.
Sounds like a pretty simple recipe.
It is very simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The simpler the better. You know, I personally have now vaporized for more than 18 years, but I don't use these little cartridges and pens because I don't know what's in them. I grow my own cannabis and I vaporize it in a volcano with hot air. And so I just inhale, you know, it's extracted with hot air. It cools off in a bag. There's no additives. I get the natural terpenes. No problem. In fact, when I first started vaporizing, I'd had other vaporizers that weren't as convenient as the volcano, but I didn't use them all the time because, holding a big heat gun over a water pipe becomes your arm is tired at the end of the night, I can tell you. But if you're with a lot of other people showing them how to do it, which I did a lot of. And so I've been using the volcano exclusively now for more than 18 years. Before that, I had been a smoker for about 30 years. And I had a bad cough. And I was coughing up black stuff from smoking for so long. And I never smoked tobacco. And but within 3 weeks of switching to the volcano, all of that coughing and phlegm and all that went away. So I haven't had lipoid pneumonia the way these people are dying from these vapor pens now. So that's my experience. Your mileage may vary. So we are at that time of year where it is about time to harvest. And so we have our friend out there, Jorge Cervantes, who's written a lot of books about cultivating cannabis. And we have a video on harvesting cannabis and about the mold that can affect it, botrytis. So we'll be right back after this first 2 minutes.
There's a lot of
Hi, this is Jorge Cervantes, and as you can see, this great big haze plant, it's a crocus haze plant, I've let go too long. I've been out of town and been doing stuff, and anyway, I let it go too long. It's still a real good plant. It's ready to harvest. I could have harvested it about a week earlier and avoided a lot of this botrytis, or botrytis cinerea, which is actually just bud mold. So I'm going to lose maybe 3%, 2-3% of the crop because of that. Well, let's get to it. Let's start harvesting.
That was a little bit shorter than we anticipated. He kind of cut off there. Started a little odd as well. But now is the time, especially in the weather we've had the past few weeks here. This has not been a good growing season for flowers here in the Portland area. And so there's been a lot of moisture, cold weather. That lends to mold. So one of the ways to stop that is to spray diluted hydrogen peroxide onto the plant and cut out the mold. Cut it out, and when you cut it out, make sure that you wash off your scissors and your hands and what you use to cut it out so you don't go spreading it around in other places with either an alcohol or a bleach solution. And so either one of those will kill that mold. But you don't want to spray the alcohol or the bleach onto your plants. Hydrogen peroxide is the best thing to spray onto the plants. So I think we have a studio audience member. If you want to come down and see us live in the studio, you can come down here. We're not here every Friday. Next Friday, I'll be off in Madison, Wisconsin at the Great Midwest Marijuana Harvest Fest. But we'll have a tape show next week. But we do have a studio audience, and someone is at the microphone right now. Go right ahead, Judy.
Hi. Hey, thank you so much for doing the show. It's so interesting and informative to listen to the two of you talking with Paul. We have use suppositories in our household, and it is my understanding and my experience that because you're not digesting it, you get sort of a time release effect with it, and the absorption is actually far superior. That's also my understanding.
Yep.
Yeah, that was also our experience.
Wonderful.
And you didn't get the high associated with it.
No.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. I'm so glad to hear someone so educated discussing it at such a level and just discussing it at all. Suppositories are not the thing that people go, oh, whoopee, wait for mine.
I do, but that's me. But yeah.
You learned that response.
You do. You do.
Wasn't like automatic.
No.
But
You tell people that
Yeah.
you learn to love what works for you. You do. But I have a question for the three of you individually together that I think about practically on a daily basis. OLCC, of course, is a disaster. We know that, and that needs to change. It's fundamental. It seems to me the obvious that we're past 91, and what's happening here is happening largely across the country with big money that at the state level, the focus is only twofold. That is control, 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 control. And the other one is collect as many taxes as possible to help out. I mean, we need the help in the state. Lord knows we do, it's not that we don't. But that's what I see. And I don't see in the recreational community, they're happy. Prices are absurd and ridiculous, and the number of chemicals that growers use on things is stunning. But they're happy because, hey, they're not at risk now for small amounts. I don't see anything cohesive and a clear path to make the changes. OCC, Dr. Rachel Knox, head of OCC, is the only thing that gives me any kind of courage, but OLCC sits on that board, as does OHA, who has been irresponsible at best. What do you think?
boy, that's a whole can of worms, isn't it? I think that we should have more cannabis producers involved in changing these laws. Now, I don't go down there myself and spend a lot of time at it because some of it is pointless with these folks. They're corrupt, I think. What do you think?
Well, you've also got the We had our meetings, we got all its input, we went ahead and did exactly what we planned to do anyway, but we went to all these meetings, and so we can say that we got your input and took it on board.
But we didn't
Yeah.
make any changes.
Of course not. Of course not.
You know, there's talk about doing another initiative. I know we had Madeline Martinez and Angela Baca here talking about doing a change to the marijuana laws. I don't think that's going forward. How else, you know, how else can we make these changes? I guess when the federal law changes, that whole specter of regulating it to stop diversion will become less important, or we can hope.
Well, it's also, again, a dysfunctional system with dysfunctional people running the system. So we need to have more indigenous people in the system. We need to have more people of color in the system, people who understand decolonized thinking, because what the system needs, from my point of view, is decolonization, period. Without it, it's going to still perpetuate the pharmaceutical industry. It's just another map of that. So until the thinking behind the system changes and the Eurocentric mindset that's developing it gets out of capitalism, it's going to keep playing the soup. So my business is underground. I don't rely on the system. I don't need the system. I work with people directly. I show them how to make their product. I encourage people to juice and grow their own plants. I don't even need the system, is my way of dealing with the system. Now, if
Overgrow the system.
Right.
And that's happening. I mean, I don't go and buy it. I just vape my own stuff, you know. Why would I go buy it? I got more than
And
I
most
need.
of the people I work with don't have a card and don't go to a dispensary. So that's where I exist, is outside of it.
What do you think, Doug?
I've been rereading Stand on Zanzibar by John Brunner, which is not as much of a non sequitur as you might think, because in fact that science fiction classic posited a future where cannabis was legal. And it wasn't diversion so much as industrial espionage to try and steal a strain or try and get one of the, you know, a cutting from one of the plants that's being grown by the major conglomerates that actually control it. And it is all very controlled, so you can buy your pack, but you're not going to be able to grow it yourself.
Sounds like Washington State.
Well, I had to sign a codicil on our lease that we would not have any plants that we wouldn't use, wouldn't process. There would be no involvement of cannabis. This is it's a partisan. I'm not in Section 8. I'm not in federal housing. It's a regular. It's a regular lease in a place right here in the Portland area, a management company, and there are more and more of those. I mean, if you own your own home, yes, you can do that in the privacy of your home inside. As you know, condo association, look at your rules, but a private apartment, yeah,
You're
forget
at the
it,
mercy of
you
the
know?
landlord.
Yeah, and it's a $250 violation for each offense, and then 3 of those can be a for-cause eviction, according to the paper I signed. Do they enforce it? Not really. Tobacco's not supposed to be smoked either, and you can smell it everywhere. But it's in there. It's that allowing people the discretion of not enforcing if they decide not to. It's like, oh, so, great. So I've got to pray that my landlord or the agent or whoever, the manager, still likes me. I'm not likable.
If you're a person of color or indigenous person, you're much more likely to be subject to a racist inquiry or complaint.
Yeah. Or if you're poor, or if you happen to be, say you're someone who's not neurotypical, you have autism. There are a lot of different reasons why people, or affected by mental health issues. There are a lot of different reasons why people decide, all right, I don't like this person, I don't want this person in my area, and when they have the discretion to be able to just summarily throw you. I mean,
Hey,
outrageous.
there you are, Doug.
Duh.
It's a little flashback there.
That was, yeah, a
Didn't
little
mean to
more
scare
hair.
you.
I'm getting the hair back to that again. It's just that it's all turning white.
Yeah, that's what happens if you're lucky. Yeah, you know, you still got hair at least, right? That's
it's
what I
still
tell
attached.
myself.
It's still attached. I have to
Right,
yank
right,
occasionally.
right.
Yes, it is really.
Well, we are down to less than 3 minutes left. Doug, how can people find all your various work? You do KBOO still? You're working at the Cabo News?
I do still have my show on Cabo, Free Culture Radio, third Wednesday of each month. I still have Century of Lies, which I produce for the Drug Truth Network. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Doug McVeigh. And you can also check out the website at Drug War Facts. I have a new project I'm working on that I probably shouldn't talk about yet that's off drugs. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's another massive deep dive into some fun learning and policy stuff.
All right.
Yeah, at Doug McVeigh.
At Doug McVeigh on Twitter. And what about you, Paula Noel McVie?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Backdoor Medicine and also at Cannabis Suppositories. And I always update pictures and the latest things I'm doing there.
That's what Instagram's for.
Yep.
It's about pictures, right? So that's a good one. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming back on the show. And I want to thank you viewers out there for watching again. Next week we will have a pre-recorded show, but we'll be back live the week after that. What is it? I think that's the 12th, though it might be the 13th. Yeah, it's Friday the 13th. That's it. That's always a good show, Friday the 13th. Anyway, thank you, folks. Here's John Cornette with some more music. We'll be back. Good night, and restore hemp.
So we say we sympathize, though we may apologize for the poor, the lost, the lonesome, and the fool. Forgiving all the greedy deeds, what the world really needs. Teach compassion to the children in the school. And heaven help you and me. God help the refugee. Help our blinded eyes to see. Grant opportunity, we have to live in peace and harmony. Burdened with self-righteousness makes your life such a mess. Never knowing if they really understood. Wrapped up in some philosophy, amazing how your eyes can see when the action that you're taking is